What's your reaction to the idea that tariffs might now be on pause?
Well, I think it's kind of a good news, bad news thing right now. The good news is that they are on hold and nothing's being implemented. The bad news is it still leaves a lot of uncertainty in the automotive industry in the United States, in my state and elsewhere. I don't think these tariffs are going to be good for the American economy. I don't think they're certainly going to be good for the automotive industry. And doing this under the guise of national security, my assumption is that this report didn't really say exactly what the president wanted, and he still wants to use this as some type of leverage. But so we'll wait and see when the full report comes out. I have some more time, but at least there's nothing going on right now to be too worried about except the uncertainty.
Now, you had introduced bipartisan legislation with Lamar Alexander, the Automotive Jobs Act of 2018, which would have delayed any potential tariffs that were imposed. What did you find when you were researching the impact of tariffs on Alabama and what it would do to the state?
Well, right now we have 57,000 automotive jobs that would literally be in jeopardy should those tariffs be imposed. You know, the automobile manufacturers estimate it's going to increase the cost of even domestic cars by over $2,000 a piece. That's just a tax. It's a tax on the American public. And so you have not only the ability of these jobs, then plants that would not be expanded, but you also have the additional burden of the tax that will be on the increase of the car. So it's going to be a double whammy in a state like Alabama.
Now, what about the idea that if we're on pause, you just said that's also not good because it's a period of uncertainty. What exactly do you want to have happen then, Senator?
Well, you know, I'd like to see him just shelve this idea of automobile tariffs and just sit down with our European, our Asian partners and discuss what's going on. What do we really need that would help the American economy, while at the same time understanding that these are our friends and our allies, and we want to be good partners with them. We want to make sure, you know, we cannot get away from the fact that we've got a global economy. This is not just about the United States. So much of what we do is interconnected with partners around the world. And I think the strategy that we're seeing right now is not really a very coherent strategy of trying to work with our partners to strengthen everyone's economy, including our own. So I'd like to see these just shelved and a sit down and some real serious discussions to go on about the pros and cons of free trade and the tariffs in general.
What are you hearing from your constituents, Senator? It's a state that President Trump won by 30 points. Surely some of them are saying, no, tariffs will be good. It will be good for the state to see tariffs, imposed on other countries. It's not right that we have to pay more and that our exports get taxed more than our imports.
Well, I think that they're beginning to realize now that there's more to this than just make America great again and a bunch of slogans. What they're seeing now is particularly our farmers are being hurt. They're continuing to be hurt. Farmers have gotten a little bit of a bailout, but they don't want a bailout. They want markets. They don't want a handout to them from the government. And so they're looking at losing those markets for a long, long time, if not permanently. The automobile manufacturers and others are seeing rising issues. Are they going to see rising prices? I think the longer this kind of so-called trade war goes on, the more people are going to feel the effects, and the more they're going to bring that home to their own pocketbooks. That's where the rubber meets the road in a state like Alabama when it starts affecting them. They want to support the goals of what the president, I think, is trying to do. Unfortunately, the way he's getting there right now doesn't make an awful lot of sense, and people are starting to hurt. And I think that's what we're feeling back in Alabama.
Have you talked to the CEOs of the companies involved, to maybe the plant leaders for the auto plants in particular that are in Alabama? And I listed them earlier, there are many. Are they actually telling you that this is putting them on hold, that there's uncertainty there?
Sure. I mean, they're very uncertain about this right now. We've got a new plant that we're breaking ground on that Toyota Mazda is coming into Alabama. We have so many opportunities right now, but I think all the plants are they're just kind of in an uncertain mode right now. They don't know exactly which way to go, and that uncertainty causes some great concern within the markets and also within the companies themselves. So we'll see how this plays out. Hopefully this is not going to last too much longer. I think the president has until February in order to make a final decision on this issue, and we can go from there.
Now, relatedly, a top Democrat came out today on trade, Bill Pascrell. He's looking to be taking over the subcommittee on trade, and said he will not support the USMCA as it stands. There will need to be changes to that Mexico-Canada trade deal before it passes. What are your thoughts?
Well, right now we haven't seen all the details. I mean, that has not been forwarded over to us. We are expecting to get that in December. You know, for a state like Alabama, it's got to, again, it's a good news, bad news. I know that there's some things in there for farmers that may be helpful, but manufacturers are still looking to see, they're kind of waiting with bated breath to see exactly the impact. Automobile dealers, again, automobile manufacturers could be impacted in this. There's no question that the NAFTA needs to be tweaked somewhat, but we've got to wait and see the full details of how this goes. I think it's a little premature to say what needs to be done. I will tell you this, what I'm hearing is I'm a little bit concerned about enforcement. I do think that in the implementation is a real issue. At least that's what we're hearing. But the devil's going to be in the details once that report finally gets, over here to us and we can see it and not just have to rely on leaks and press reports.
Just on the president's overall approach to trade, we've known, the type of approach he's going to be taking for a long, long time, and whether anything has actually been implemented or not is almost beside the point to what it does to business. What have you seen to be the consequences in Alabama so far of the president's general trade approach?
Well, right now we are seeing, again, we're seeing lower prices in our farm products. We're seeing the loss of some markets, and people are getting concerned about that. Right now, it's just a wait-and-see attitude. We have lost some jobs. For instance, I talked to a chemical company in Mobile back early on, right after I was sworn in. They were looking to expand, and with the trade issues that have come up and the retaliatory trade with China, they've decided to shelve that project for the time being. I think you see more and more businesses like that are small to medium-sized businesses that have just got things on hold until they see how this is going to play out. I think that's happening in Alabama. I think it's happening across the country.
Now, this piece of legislation, which may or may not be needed anymore, this jobs legislation, was bipartisan. You were working with Lamar Alexander. Where else do you see the ability to introduce bipartisan legislation, and what other subjects?
Well, I think there's several when it comes to, I think, overall business and trade. But the one that's also pending is one that I've got introduced with Senator Portman and Senator Ernst. And that would basically take the determination of national security out of the Commerce Department and put it over in the Defense Department where it really needs to be in the first place. I think that would also be that's an important aspect. Regardless of where people stand on tariffs and trade, it just seems to make a lot of sense to kind of bifurcate the decisions of national security and then how the trade policy might be implemented to if national security is affected. That's one that I'm hopefully can move either during the lame duck session of Congress or either after the first of the year.
Senator, you've had a day and a half or so to wander around the halls of Congress in this lame duck session, this post-midterm election session. Does it feel to you like there is room for bipartisan legislation that, between now and the next presidential election, that there will be some, pieces of legislation passed in a bipartisan manner?
I do think so. I think that it provides an interesting opportunity. Look, I think both Democrats and Republicans have to understand that in order to get any meaningful legislation passed these days, you're going to have to reach across the aisle. You're going to have to try to work together. You've got a House of Representatives now that is significantly Democrat. You've got at least one seat gained with the Republicans in the Senate. In order to get anything meaningful, you're going to have to reach across the aisle. That means folks like myself and others that are kind of in the middle and the centrist positions can help try to do that. And so I think that there's a real opportunities to do that in the coming year. I think part of it is going to rely on the president. I think he's going to have to make sure he doesn't have both houses of Congress now, and he's going to have to make a real overt effort to try to bring in Democrats to try to see where we can do and reach that common ground that so many people in this election cycle have talked about, that we started that discussion in the election last December. So I am cautiously optimistic.
More generally, talk to us about the Mississippi Senate runoff and what you've learned about how Democrats could win in the Deep South.
Well, I think you've got to, you have to understand where the base of votes are. I think you have to take care of your own base of votes first, and then you've got to reach across and to see where other votes might be there that you can, as I say, close the gap sometime. Rural versus urban areas is obviously an issue that's out there right now. We have a very divided country. And I want to see more Democrats reach across not only political aisles, but reach across cultural aisles, trying to make sure that we are representing all people. And I think if you can do that, you can make inroads, because I do believe that on so many of the issues, both business as well as labor, that a lot of those issues are issues that people can relate to, regardless of where they live in America.
So give us some concrete strategies, some concrete advice for Democrats on rural areas, particularly. You talk about, finding a base. How do Democrats do that in the most rural of areas?
I think you talk about the issues that we talked about last December, and that's what I call the kitchen table issues. I think you have to talk about their health care. People are still very concerned about their health care and their health care needs. They're concerned about access to health care. In Alabama, we're losing rural hospitals, and we need to do what we can to shore up access to rural health in America. I think you need to talk about wages. We are seeing historic low unemployment, but wage increases are rising at a much slower rate. And in places in the South, they are rising even slower. So I think those are the issues that people are very concerned about. They want to see jobs coming in, but they also want to see good wages. And I think Democrats need to just really both talk to people, but more importantly, they need to listen. They need to listen to folks and understand their concerns. Oftentimes, we don't do as much listening as we should.